The people that are saying that Bo Bassett's move is good for college wrestling know that it has nothing to do with Iowa.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of the show, and help me welcome back a wrestling expert. He is the voice of Rutgers Wrestling. He also covers wrestling for On3. That is Nick Kosko. Links to his work will be down in the description. We are talking the impact of Bo Bassett's commitment, the domino effect it could have. Is it good for the sport? Well, we're going to debate that first. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, as always, let us know your thoughts down in the comments section to be a part of this conversation. Nick, let's jump right into the fact that there's a good handful of people that would argue that Bo Bassett going to Iowa is good for college wrestling. I want to reframe that argument because I don't think it's so much about Iowa. I think there are just a lot of people that are just tired of Penn State and they're just glad it is good. They see it as good for the sport because not so much that he's going to Iowa, but that he's not going to Penn State.
Yeah, Zach, thanks for having me back on, first of all. I think when you look at the landscape of college wrestling, it's Penn State, Penn State, Penn State, and then pretty much everybody else. I think Penn State, last time I was on, I mentioned to you that Penn State's B team, so to speak, the guys who are on the outside looking in at the starting lineup could probably score a lot at NCAAs and maybe be a top 4 team on their own. So, it's like share the wealth or something along those lines. I think if you're a non-Penn State fan, that's the way you're feeling. If you're a Penn State fan, you're like, okay, he didn't come here. We still have X, Y, and Z. They just got Marcus Blaze, for instance. He's coming in. So, that's another top recruit that Penn State would usually get. Penn State would probably usually get somebody like Bo Bassett, but I think him not going to Penn State can kind of even the playing field a little bit. Now, I'm not saying Iowa's going to overtake Penn State as soon as Bassett comes on campus. I know Oklahoma State's trying their hardest right now to get, a jump start on that with the way David Taylor's been coaching them up this year in his first year. And we'll see how that obviously matriculates over the next couple of years. But yeah, I think it's awesome. I think, you see, I know it's another big brand. So maybe if you're not a fan of Penn State, Iowa, or Oklahoma State, I think you might have wanted to see him go to somewhere like Virginia Tech, which made his Final Four. I know his other 3 schools that he cut right before that, Ohio State, Michigan, and Rutgers. Maybe people wanted to see him go to one of those schools. I know they're all Big Ten. I know Rutgers was kind of the outlier, like Virginia Tech, where they're not a traditional power, even like Ohio State and Michigan, where it's like, oh yeah, it would be cool to see him at one of those schools. I know, broadcasting for Rutgers, a lot of Rutgers fans were very excited at the prospect of just having him on campus and having a shot at him. But ultimately, I think his decision was, good for college wrestling. If he went to Penn State, then it's like, okay, we're going to cover him the same way. He's going to be a guy that you're going to want to cover pretty much every time he says something or he's on the mat in practice or in a dual meet or at a tournament. So it's great. He's got a huge following. I know there's whispers about what he was able to obtain NIL-wise. Now, those numbers are at this time unfounded. But, if it's a big package, if it's a comparable package to most schools, wherever the case may be, I think him going to Iowa was probably years in the making, considering the Young Guns Wrestling Club connection with PA and Iowa. He was a big Spencer Lee fan. He's always loved Iowa. So I think in the end, it's not as surprising that they were one of his top 4 schools and ultimately the school that he chose. Now, whether you want to argue it was because of money or not, that's up for interpretation. I just choose to believe right now that he made the decision best for him and potentially his family moving forward as far as what he wants to accomplish on and off the mat. So I'm excited to see it. Believe me, there are a lot of Iowa haters out there. I don't hate anybody. I just want to see some great college wrestling. I want to see that Penn State-Iowa rivalry, get back to what it was a few years ago and not have these lopsided victories. It's great for Penn State, maybe for the casual fan. I think this will certainly bring them back in a couple of years if Iowa and other schools like Oklahoma State and such start rebuilding and getting back to that level.
And with this framing, because I understand the point of view of just, well, Penn State just keeps getting the top ranked wrestlers. You already mentioned Marcus Blaze, PJ Duke in that conversation as well, right? And I've talked about it already or on different podcasts that Penn State and Iowa are simply trading punches at this point. It's kind of a net neutral because Penn State gets Marcus Blaze and PJ Duke, and depending on what rankings you look at, those are the 1 and 2 best pound for pound wrestlers in the class of 2025. Iowa's simply getting a head start on the class of 2026 by getting a Bo Bassett We're going to talk about Jax Forrest in this conversation as well. Drayshawn Ross goes to Oklahoma State. So this definitely, this move certainly knocks Penn State off in down the road, but because of all the legwork that they've done, the leverage that they have from 24 and 2025, it really, in my opinion, doesn't shift the paradigm. Let me take this a step further. Going to Iowa, I don't think is good for it. It doesn't. Oh, it's great for college wrestling, this and that. If you're looking at it from anything to knock Penn State off its course, fine. Then that's what you're going to agree with, and I think you made a good point of articulating that. But Iowa, I don't know that Iowa gets any closer to Penn State. I really think the program that is pushing the bar is Oklahoma State. So for Bo Bassett to choose Iowa over Oklahoma State is a big deal. But it's only the domino effect that we're going to talk about a little more in the final segment as well. Because if Bo Bassett gets you potentially Jax Forrest, Melvin Miller, that this Bishop McCourt nucleus basically goes over to Iowa instead of dispersing. Because if it does disperse and one person goes here, one person goes there, Sam Herring's already committed to Penn State, then this really doesn't change anything. So unless Iowa can win this comprehensive battle overall, then yes, it changes things. But even to an extent, Penn State's just so much further ahead, and I feel like Oklahoma State is best positioned to catch them, not Iowa.
Yeah, maybe so. I think you have to look at the future, and I don't have the names in front of me, but obviously Drayshawn Ross going to Oklahoma State's a huge get. He was an Iowa guy, so the fact that Oklahoma State was able to swoop in and get him, that was huge. You know, he had Iowa and Iowa State among his Final Four. I forget who the other one was. It might have been Penn State. It was Penn State. So, I don't necessarily agree with the Oklahoma State over Iowa thing. I think you have to look at their future lineups. Oklahoma State is reliant heavily on the grad transfer this year. Wyatt Hendrickson, obviously, at heavyweight. Dean Hamidi, I believe this is his final year of eligibility for Wisconsin. Of course, Cam Amin, who was at Michigan for a long time. This is his final year. Caleb Fish, I think, I know they sorted that out now. I think all four of those guys are in their final year of eligibility, if I'm not mistaken. Hamidi might have one more year, I think, or he was able to take a red shirt. I forget the case, but I think they're all, off the top of my head, they're all going to be done after this year. Hamidi's the only one I'm currently questioning off the top of my head right now. But still, they have a lot of guys coming in. They have a really good lineup that does have young guys. I know, with homegrown guys like Troy Spradley at the lower weights. The fact that Tegan Jameson's kind of come on. So I think David Taylor is really proving the ability to develop guys. I know Dustin Plott, he's obviously still in the mix right there. I think he's a senior, though, at this point. So Luke Serber at 97. So you look at what David Taylor's done from a developmental standpoint. So you're not wrong in that aspect where maybe it seems like they have a better long-term outlook to catch Penn State than Iowa. But don't forget, Iowa still has guys like Gabe Arnold. I know the whole thing with Carter Sirachi. He didn't wrestle him. Gabe Arnold's a top 5 guy for a reason at 184. Angelo Ferrari's there. They're going to bring in Harvey Ludington next year. He's going to be a freshman. I would expect him probably to get a chance right away. The Hawkeyes, he's from Brick Memorial High School out here in New Jersey. So really good, 2-time state champion, should win his 3rd state title when it's all said and done in March. So they're going to have a lot of young guys coming in. Ben Keeter's still young. And don't forget, Penn State does graduate Greg Kirkfleet this year. So Iowa is set up long-term as well when it comes to the younger guys. And I forget how many years Drake Ayala has, just speaking of the lightweight guys as well. I think he has maybe 1 or 2 years left. Maybe it's 2 off the top of my head. So by the time you get a guy like Bo Bassett in, I would imagine, unless they plan on redshirting him right away, he's probably a guy that might go right away at 49 or 57 by the time he's a freshman in college. And then you mentioned the Jax Forrest domino effect because, Drayshawn Ross goes to Oklahoma State. If Forrest follows Bo Bassett, and don't forget their other teammate who's a starter in that lineup, Owen McMullen, if they all go to Iowa, you have the Bishop McCourt pipeline. Obviously, Melvin Miller is only a sophomore, so he's not going to commit yet. Keegan Bassett, Bo's younger brother, I would imagine he's going to follow Bo to Iowa. That seems to be the plan right there. He's only a freshman, so that's down the line as well. But you do make also a good point on the other hand with Bishop McCourt in that it could spread the wealth because, again, you see guys like Owen McMullen and Bo Bassett, they go to Iowa. But let's say Melvin Miller goes somewhere else when he commits, at least by next year. Or if Jack Forrest goes to Oklahoma State or Penn State or Ohio State rather than Iowa, Devin Magro, another starter in their lineup, he's going to Rutgers next year. So you have a bunch of guys that are they're opening up their options. So I think on one hand, Iowa and Oklahoma State are probably on an equal playing field when it comes to catching Penn State. It depends upon who's going to spend more resources on development as well as the transfer portal. But also, if they do spread the wealth, where do these guys go? Are they all going to go into one place like Iowa, or are they all going to start funneling towards Oklahoma State? I think the biggest domino to fall now will be Jax Forrest, who I know at the time of this recording he's going to commit tomorrow on Thursday. So if he goes to Iowa, then Iowa's really loading up for their junior class. If he goes to Oklahoma State, Cowboys are doing the same thing. I think whatever school gets him, if it's one of those two, will get a small leg up at this time because it is still the junior class, still got time. But I think it is a very interesting discussion when you look at all the different avenues that these recruits could go in.
You mentioned it in this opening segment here, Bo Bassett and why he committed to Iowa. There was that long-term connection and, of course, the affiliation with Spencer Lee. But what were some of the other real reasons? Some people believe it's monetary. There are some other things that definitely would have convinced him to go to Iowa over the likes of Penn State. And I think the case for Oklahoma State over them was interesting. We'll discuss it more on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Are you looking for tickets to your next big event? Whether it's a concert, comedy show, sporting event, finding the right ticket at the right price, it can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you, or over at gametime.co. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. When you use Game Time Picks, you'll love it. It curates the deals and makes it super simple. You'll find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. You'll have the super deal to get that prime seat, and you won't believe the value. And then the best part of it all, this is a game changer, the seat view. You'll have a point of view ahead of time so you can see your point of view, where you will be sitting from. And this comes in handy, especially if you've never been to that specific stadium, arena, or venue. It's so reassuring. The best part, you're covered by the Game Time lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they are going to refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Are you ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. That is code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So why did Bo Bassett ultimately choose Iowa? Nick, I think you bring up an excellent point that relationships matter above all else. I mean, he's been recruited for such a long time. So Iowa has a strong relationship with him. So does Penn State. So does David Taylor. So regardless of David Taylor was at Oregon State, for example, right? Oregon State would have been in his top 4. So it's all about relationships. And Iowa had a strong relationship, whether there were some financial initiatives in there as well. I think, at the end of the day, it does show a commitment from Iowa to say that we want you badly enough that we're going to push the bar allegedly to get, whatever that financial commitment is to make sure that we get the prospect we care about the most. So be it if you want to look at it from that angle, or if they're trying, this is pay for play, they're trying to buy a national title team. You could make that argument as well. I've certainly made it in other episodes, but I think Bo Bassett has earned the right to start for 4 years, and I don't think at Penn State he can do that initially. I think that at Penn State may be able, there's the case that yes, he's going to develop the best at Penn State because he'll be around, the idea is that he'll be around better competition, and look what Cale Sanderson and company are doing. Okay, that is objective and subjective to an extent. But if Bo Bassett's intentions are to not take a red shirt, to start as soon as possible, that path's probably not at Penn State, because when he arrives as a true freshman, Shane Van Ness is still going to be at 149. Tyler Kasek's still going to be at 157. Mitchell Messenbrink's still going to be at 165. So even of all the different possibilities, because Bo Bassett, is he going to put on any extra weight? Who knows at the end of the day, but I imagine he's going to stay around 145 where he's truly wrestling. And if that is the case, Penn State doesn't have an avenue for him to start right away during his freshman season.
I mean, that could be the case at Iowa too, depending upon how they want to develop him. Maybe they do say, hey, I'm not going to speak on any financial terms of a potential NIL deal for Bo's. I believe, if you were in the running, and whether it was top 4 or his initial top 7 before he made that quick decision to cut down to 4, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, he's committing this
Right.
week.
Yeah.
I think they all were offering at some point some sort of NIL compensation. That's just what you have to do with a prospect of his stature, regardless of the sport. That's kind of spoken for at that point. As far as how the figures measured up, I can't speak on that because I truly don't know. If he says they were all comparable, I'm inclined to believe him. Whether you want to believe him or not, that's up for interpretation, of course, as I mentioned before. As far as him starting right away, I mean, who knows? He could have done it at Penn State. Maybe they make it work. I know at this current time, his freshman year would be the 26-27 season. You already mentioned Shane Van Ness, Tyler Kasak, Mitchell Messenbrink. Of course, all three of those guys could be national champs at that point or multi-time national champions at that point. So when you look at where he would have fit into the lineup, I mean, who knows? Maybe they could have moved things around where, Shane Van Ness, he's not in the lineup, or Tyler Kasak is not in the lineup. Don't forget, he had a red shirt, and all of a sudden they pulled it last year because of Shane Van Ness's injury. So I'm not saying that they would do that. It would be more likely that Bo would
possibility
freshman year, right? But I think to rule it out completely, I think would be disingenuous. As far as Iowa, maybe he's a better shot, a better shot to start right away at Iowa at 149 or 157, depending upon the lineup shakeout, whether who transfers in or who transfers out. You have to weigh that possibility as well. So if that was part of his thinking, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But if that was part of his thinking, maybe you do choose Iowa over Penn State, or maybe Oklahoma State over Penn State at that point. But I think either way, he would have been a fit at any of those top 4 schools. Even if it was Virginia Tech, I think Virginia Tech would probably be a candidate where he definitely starts right away as well. But I think if he had picked any of those 4 schools on the other night, I think, he would have been a fit and a threat to start right away because of how good he is already. This guy's a world medalist at his age levels. He's already a PA state champion, when the team was eligible to compete in the state championships. And who knows? He might never lose in high school again. So I think at this point, you're the number 1 prospect for a reason. If you're good enough to go, you go. And then, maybe it's an apples to oranges comparison, but look at Gabe Arnold and Angelo Ferrari right now. Angelo Ferrari was the top prospect in his class for Iowa. He comes in, there are people who are arguing that maybe he should start over Gabe Arnold, but Gabe Arnold's still there. Can you make the argument? Sure. Can you make the argument for Gabe Arnold? Absolutely. But, just to throw it out there, it's not as uncommon as you think, but you're probably right in saying that there's a better shot, so to speak, for him to start right away at Iowa than there is at Penn State. But I think either way, redshirt or not, he would have been a perfect fit at whatever school he chose.
Before we get to the actual domino effect of recruiting, Jax Forrest, of course, Keegan Bassett, his brother, Melvin Miller, Eli Herring, Sam Herring's brother, and Sam Herring is committed to Penn State's class of 2026. But the idea, when I look at the alleged amount of money, regardless, if it's football, basketball, and now in this case of wrestling, I look at it almost in a sense of, so Nick, this is just kind of just to get some general thinking and just to kind of hear a response to this, because I haven't seen this really put out there much publicly, is that any sort of NIL money is almost an insurance policy, if you will, because things could go wrong, can go wrong. And the point that I've always tried to make about money is it in some regards, it does take away from yourself as a competitor. So this is kind of generally speaking, but if it applies to Bo Bassett, so be it. That if you're willing to sacrifice some of the NIL money to go to the best situation, regardless of the circumstances, and then that idea is Penn State, is that Cale Sanderson, the coaching staff, and the wrestling room as itself gives you the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself. But you're going to have to sacrifice some other things, that insurance policy of NIL, because we never know. And I don't want to wish any ill will on Bo Bassett as a junior in high school, or any athlete that takes NIL money, or that's a factoring reason. But it does so, since you are taking a short-term insurance policy over long-term risk, that because he's going to get the NIL money if he doesn't live up to those long-term expectations. Then you don't have that if you happen to fail and not meet those goals, if that makes sense of what I'm trying to articulate here.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. But again, I don't want to put any words into his mouth and say that NIL was the driving force. If it was, it was. And if it wasn't, it wasn't. I'm not going to speak for him either way.
I don't blame him if that's the case. If somebody offered me millions of dollars, right, I definitely have to consider it.
Right. Yeah. And, if the alleged figures are true, it'd be hard to say no to that. If they aren't true, I think it's, it comes down to what's more important. I think what's more important to him is wrestling overall. And, if this alleged figure was out there from a school like, I don't know, let's say Ohio State or Michigan, just a pure hypothetical, and he had went there and that figure was thrown out, maybe there are people out there that are going to say, well, it was money driven because where's the connection to this school? He visited them, but where's the connection to this school? You know what I mean? So
yeah, Iowa's been there for a long time.
I think the Iowa thing, people are going to say what they're going to say. There's a lot of, again, a lot of Iowa haters out there. I think Iowa's great for the sport. I think Penn State's great for the sport when they have somebody to battle them head to head, like an Iowa or like an Oklahoma State. So if that number is true, that that you and I have both heard floated out there, I don't even want to say it out loud just because it could be completely unfounded. But if that's true, then good for Iowa, good for Bo, good for everyone else involved. That's awesome. If that was the main reason, the main driving force, because wrestling is not, there's no professional league. You aspire for world and Olympic medals, and some athletes are compensated very fairly when it comes to that stuff, but there's no pro league. You're not going to the NFL, you're not going to the NBA. Okay, so it's different. So you might have to take your opportunities where they're handed out to you. If there's an opportunity you can't pass up, you can't pass it up. But I truly believe that, this kid, because of how good he is right now, what we've seen from the international level for him on his in his age groups, whether he went to Penn State for no money, or Iowa for no money, or to Iowa for a lot of money, or Penn State for a lot of money, or anywhere else for little money or a lot of money. I think either way, he's a generational prospect that we have not seen in quite some time. I know you could say that about a lot of guys, pretty much each recruiting class, like, oh yeah, this kid's on a different level. This kid truly is on a different level, and I think the way he was marketing himself, even well before his college recruitment started, I think we anticipated this. So if that's part of it, and if other athletes follow his footsteps that are nearly this good or as good, and they're able to market themselves, you're going to see more than just maybe a Penn State, Iowa, Oklahoma State. Maybe some other schools are eventually going to pony up and pay these athletes, because that's just the way of the world now. So I don't want to put make it a black and white issue, but I think because it's part of it now, I think it kind of just goes all hand in hand with what he thought was the best situation for him, training wise, coaching wise, area wise, and ultimately, what he felt, I guess, in his heart, I want to say, and obviously very driven by faith as well. I think he went to Iowa for a reason, and it's not just one reason. It's probably a multitude of factors.
To follow up what you said about making it to the pros and everything else, ask Abel Stevenson how difficult it is with not only WWE but the NFL as well. So I'm really glad you brought up that point. I will finish with this: the market is the market, right? So Bo Bassett has certainly earned that investment from somebody, and if Iowa was allegedly willing to pay it, so be it at the end of the day, right? Just objectively speaking, let's talk about this domino effect in recruiting. He's got a lot of talented teammates. Jax Forrest so Bo Bassett's the number 1 overall prospect. Jax Forrest is number 2. He's not too far off, and those two train together every single day at Bishop McCourt. We'll talk about where they could end up and why Iowa needs to get a Jax Forrest and other teammates of Bo Bassett's to make this move worthwhile. That's all coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun, simple to get in on the action. And here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. That's right, just 1 yard. Pair that with 1 more correct pick, and you're cashing out. This week, when you look at the board, you can see other players like Travis Kelce. Do you think he will have more or less than his receiving yards total? Or what about the other quarterback, Jalen Hurts? Do you think he'll have more or less than his passing yards total? And the best part about all of it, fast, safe withdrawals. When you win, your cash is in your account in as little as 15 minutes. Check out the promos tab to tail any super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promotion funds. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. So this feels almost like an all or nothing kind of move to me, in a sense, for Iowa, that if you get Bo Bassett, right, he's the key that unlocks a lot of other doors to potentially Jax Forrest, of course, his brother Keegan Bassett, who's very talented in his own right as a lighter weight. I don't know that they're going to get an Eli Herring, for example, because right, we're talking about brothers. Okay, Keegan and Bo Bassett go to Iowa. Sam Herring and Eli Herring are most likely going to end up together at Penn State, since Sam Herring is already committed to the class of 2026 for Penn State. But everybody's going to focus on Jax Forrest and Melvin Miller as well. And if I was able to get all three of them, then yes, this investment pays off for the alleged amount of NIL money. It's not even about that. You are making a commitment to a player or wrestler, an athlete that can help build the program out. But as we mentioned earlier, if Oklahoma State's able to make a play, or Ohio State, or anybody's able to chip away at this, then it doesn't, I don't know that the investment carries as much, because then it's about, I think Iowa is trying to at least set itself up to where it's getting Bo Bassett, Jax Forrest, Melvin Miller, and then some. It's not just about Bassett himself.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. And the fact that Jax Forrest made his Final Four, Iowa, Penn State, Oklahoma State, and Ohio State is no secret at this point. Well, obviously, because he just put that out earlier today as we were recording this. But he initially had him in the top 10. Jax Forrest, made a strict top 10 back in September. He didn't really make any bones about it. It was like, hey, these are the schools that I'm interested in, the schools that have heavily recruited me, the ones that I want to cut down to, make my visits or, talk to the most. So he did so. Iowa's in the Final Four. Obviously, you would love the 1-2 punch of a Jax Forrest and Bo Bassett at Iowa, and eventually, I would imagine Keegan Bassett as well to follow. He's class of 2028, so you still have a little bit, 2 years after that, so after those guys make their Hawkeye debuts. And, of course, Melvin Miller, who's a top prospect, or the top prospect according to Matt Scouts in 2027. He's the other prize guy, but, of course, he can't do anything until next year where the official visits are actually official. And, of course, he can make an announcement and commit to somewhere. So I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes. As far as the Iowa investment, ideally you would like to get Forrest in the same class. You get Miller the following year, then you assume you get Keegan Bassett in 2028 as well. So then you have 3 straight years of these Bishop McCourt guys that are highly ranked, if not the top ranked guys in the class. But it will be interesting if Forrest elects to go to Oklahoma State, if they make a late push, or he surprises everybody and goes to Ohio State. And again, I'm not going to be stunned if he goes to Penn State, and maybe he wants to go to Penn State and learn from Cale Sanderson and that elite room at the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club as well. Because again, we saw Jax Forrest at the Senior World Team Trials just last year. He took, he made it to that 3rd, 4th place match. So when you talk about a guy who's already ready for the senior level type stuff, like Bo Bassett seemingly is, Jax Forrest has already gone out there and proven it as well. We saw Bo nearly make the Olympic trials as well when it came to last summer. Which would have been insane for a high schooler of his caliber as well. We've seen Marcus Blaze tear it up, who's going to Penn State. We've seen Jack Forrest do really well. So these guys are ready to win now. If he goes to Iowa, great for Iowa. Then they're loading up on the young talent, and then it's about developing those guys and can they match up with Penn State in a few years, which with that level of talent, maybe you can. If he goes to Oklahoma State, good for Oklahoma State. And then it's a matter of, all right, does Melvin Miller follow those guys, or does he do his own thing at that point and not go to Iowa or Oklahoma State? Maybe he goes to Penn State. Maybe he goes to one of the other big schools, whether it's in the Big 10 or Big 12 or an outside-the-box school in the ACC. Who knows, like a Virginia Tech at this point. But I think best case scenario for Iowa, because they're in on all of them, would be to get Jax Forrest when he announces his commitment. If he gets him, or if they get him, then you're in good shape. Then at that point, you get those 2 guys in the junior class, top 2 guys in the junior class, and of course with Drayshawn Ross already going to Oklahoma State, you've already shut Penn State out of the elite prospects. Not saying that's going to really affect Penn State that much, considering the talent they already have in the room and their other recruiting efforts and their development efforts. But I think that'll start to see a recruiting shift, at least whether it's NIL or just better recruitment related, or both. I think that you'll see at least a shift starting with the junior class. Then you'll have to see where Melvin Miller goes in 2027, where he follows his teammates to Iowa, Oklahoma State, or wherever else, or he goes his own path. That'll be a big determining factor of where the shift ends up going in a couple of years. But I think Iowa would certainly bode well if they land Jax Forrest, if he announces his commitment to the Hawkeyes. And then you're talking about, okay, you got Bassett, you got Forrest, you already got Owen McMullen in the fold already. You're probably going to get Keegan Bassett. Now what do you get? Do you get Melvin Miller after that? Then all eyes are going to be going back over to Iowa City.
Right. And that's what I mean when I say this move really only. Yeah, Bo Bassett isn't a loss, right? I'm not trying. But for this to be a slam dunk, you need at least a Jax Forrest. You need to be able to check off. And by doing so, you are going to get a Keegan Bassett. But can you stack on top of that? Or is Oklahoma State going to, because I know that I don't want to say that David Taylor is scrambling, but let's just say he's making more of an aggressive push to say, okay, we didn't get Bo Bassett here, but we do need another headlining prospect, and that would be Jax Forrest. And I know they have a very strong relationship. David Taylor certainly really wants Jax Forrest to be a part of Oklahoma State. So it's about relationships at the end of the day. Like I said, if David Taylor was somewhere else, happened to be Ohio State, Oregon State, NC State, whatever have you, we'd be talking about this. So it's not necessarily about the university, but brand appeal with Oklahoma State and the history behind it. The idea that I want to finish with, Nick, is that this isn't now Penn State's scrambling itself. They need to respond. They're on the losing end of all of this. This is all a reaction to what Penn State did. This is all by proxy a response to what Penn State was able to do in 2024 and now 2025. The fact that they were on the outside looking into getting a Marcus Blaze. It made sense if he would have ended up at Purdue or Ohio State, and Penn State circles the wagons and gets the number one pound for pound wrestler in that class to add alongside PJ Duke. So Iowa and Oklahoma State are essentially scrambling to try to respond to what Penn State has done for the past 2 years. And that, so Penn State, this doesn't, like I said, it doesn't really affect them because it's just the natural response to how strong they are set up for the next 3-4 years.
Long term, I should say in the immediacy, it's not going to affect them. And I'm not saying even with, you're talking about if Iowa doesn't get a guy like Jax Forrest, or they end up not getting Melvin Miller in the end over the next couple of years. Not the end all be all. There's more prospects. Okay, it's not just the number one guy or the number two guy overall in a class. I'm looking at Penn State's big board commitments for 2026. It's only Sam Herring right now. So again, it's still a little bit. It's really early in the process. But he's number 20 pound for pound. You look at a guy like that. He's already in the fold. They already have an influx, a treasure trove of talent already in the class of 2025. What they're going to get in 26, and a lot of their lineup is young outside of the veteran guys. Up top with like Srirachi and Kirkvliet, for example, and these guys are going to be in the lineup for a long time. So as far as Penn State being behind the eight ball, they're not behind the eight ball. No. They're the best team for a reason. I can't even guarantee that if Iowa in a couple of years, if they have Bassett, Miller, Forrest, I'm talking like let's just say 4 years from now. Mm-hmm. Wherever class these guys are in at that point, off the top of my head, say you have a McMullen, a Bassett, a Forrest, a Miller in your starting lineup with some other guys like Ferrari should still be in the lineup at that point after a redshirt year. So let's talk about those core guys for Iowa. Does that team beat Penn State in the dual meet, or do they beat them at NCAA's when it comes to the team score? Maybe, but Penn State
put yourself in a better position at a minimum.
Right, so they're going to be in competition, and the race might be a lot closer at that point. But is Penn State really going to be caught over the next 2 to 4 years by somebody? Maybe, but that's a big maybe. And it comes down to, are these guys instant impact guys as freshmen that can score a lot of points in the national tournament, win national titles right off the bat? They have the potential to do so, especially a guy like Bo Bassett and Jax Forrest and Marcus Blaze. If we're talking about Iowa and Penn State, I would say these guys certainly have the ability to win right away if they're in the lineup, just based on the coaching they're getting and the situations they're going to. So it's not Penn State catching up in by any means. We can revisit this conversation in 5 years, depending upon what happens at that point, and then see, all right, who are the next number one guys in their junior and sophomore classes, and how they're going to recruit ahead in the 2030s, which is hard to believe off the top of my head. So Penn State's not behind the eight ball. It stinks for Penn State that they didn't get Bo Bassett, and they might not get Jax Forrest, and they might not get Melvin Miller, but who knows? If Jax Forrest says, I'm going to Penn State tomorrow, then okay, they're right back on it, and now Penn State is back on top in terms of the class of 2026 with what they're able to build. I'm sure they're going to get a domino effect from Forrest going there. But if Iowa gets them, then it'll be a domino effect there. If Oklahoma State gets them, it'll be a domino effect there. Then again, the outlier. If Ohio State, they were cut from Bassett's final list. If they happen to get Jax Forrest, then how does Ohio State reload? Can't forget about Ohio State either.
Yeah, I don't think Ohio State's too far behind. I think they're kind of the forgotten school. And the big three are Penn State, Oklahoma State, Iowa right now, but I definitely could make an argument that Ohio State is closer rather than further away.
Yep,
That's
they
going to
are.
do.
Yeah, they're certainly reloading for sure, and then they'll set up nice, especially when Rocco Welsh is projected to be back in the lineup next season. There, it's going to look pretty dangerous for Ohio State.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. A great conversation with the expert himself, Nick Kosko, over on the other side. Does wrestling coverage for On3, is also the play-by-play voice for Rutgers Wrestling. His work will be linked down in the description. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. Nick, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it, and can't wait to have you back on the podcast to discuss more Penn State wrestling and NCAA wrestling overall.
Appreciate you, Zach. Thanks, man.